Hello all! Rick here once more with a video on a rather fascinating Starfleet vessel. Aside from its looks and one appearance in Lower Decks, which of course was tinged with humour, we know nothing about it. But it is without a doubt an intriguing ship. So much so that even its classification is technically unknown, with it termed the Osler type, named after the USS Osler NX 75300, which at least suggests this is the prototype and therefore the class. The class was named after Dr. William Osler, Canadian-born and creator of the first residency training for specialty physicians. Funnily enough, alongside a long list of professional acumen, he was apparently regarded as a bit of a prankster, which might be another on-point reference for this vessel. To begin with, let's take a look at what this ship was built for, and surprise, it was not medical science. The lore is drawn from Lower Decks' Star Trek Adventures sourcebook. So, during the Dominion War, Starfleet was exposed to a deficiency in its ranks, that of stealth ships. While you had the Defiant with its cloak, it was only one vessel, and the Treaty of Algeron still prevented any more from being made. Vessels like the Steam Runner were made to delve into enemy lines, but they were visible doing so. The Andorian Imperial Guard began to work to rectify that. However, their first prototype was not completed until 2377, 2 years after the war had ended. The Osler was built with the traditional Andorian-style starship in mind, leading to its unique look, and the line ended up only creating a handful of vessels that mostly remained in Andorian hands. However, Starfleet saw another use for at least one of this class. Division 14 is a subsect of Starfleet science that handles medical issues of a complex or atypical nature that have afflicted their staff. It operates from the planet Endochronomus 5, colloquially referred to as the Farm. While technically a medical facility, it wholly tackles problems that are outside of most medical personnel, and more closely related to side effects or accidents. Things that your standard team might not have the ability to reverse. Basically, I can imagine any issue that the Voyager's EMH could fix. All those experiments that ended up with transporter malfunctions, spliced DNA, the devolution or evolution of a human on a Warp 10 experimental flight. These sorts of extreme events, where a bit more attention is needed to fix. Now, the farm itself was actually a very relaxed and lovely place, with many spa-like facilities there because the well-being of the patients was the foremost concern, and many would likely end up spending a long time here. However, that in itself presents a new problem. The fact that many of these extreme cases were the result of experimental technology or the like meant that any patient there might technically be a security risk to those experiments, including the clandestine ones. After all, we can tell that someone in Starfleet must have attempted to repeat Tom Paris's Warp 10 flight and suffered the same fate, so one can imagine the level of classification now around a potential Starfleet Warp 10 program. So, while the farm might be defended and highly secret, there was a method needed to collect and contain afflicted personnel from their assignments all over Federation space, a task that their own ships or current postings might not be up for. So, the Osler was assigned to this role, to contain the results of accidents which could possibly pose a risk to others, as well as any project they were attached to. It is very unlike other Starfleet vessels, so much so that on first glance you would be forgiven for not recognising it as a Starfleet ship. The vessel was built with those chief aspects of containment and secrecy in mind, and was expected to travel around for months collecting individuals that were to be taken to Endochronomus 5, then returning to that base to deposit those in its charge. The Osler type was not a very large ship at an estimated 200 metres long, when docked to the 535 metre California class, although its warp engines were proportionally huge, suggesting it was built for a minimal profile and speed, making sense for its role. Additionally, it was covered in a sensor-reflecting material that acted to disperse scanners, a similar substance to what we see Section 31 ships used back when they still had a fleet in the 23rd century. While not cloaking, this aids immensely in masking the vessel from long-range scans, allowing it to complete its courier duties in peace. This is also a reason for its more angular appearance, like a stealth plane's panels, helping it break up its silhouette, but this does mean that it has a rather imposing visage in its matte black hull and spiked shape. Internally too, it seems to run at a low power mode, which would further reduce its detectability, unfortunately adding to the eerie atmosphere. While the farm might be a relaxing destination, the Osler itself was far from enticing. Furthering its stealth capabilities, the warp bubble it created was unusually narrow and kept stable by the extended boom above the ship. It could also extend battles over key areas of the ship to displace any heat created, which it would then radiate when it could at a later time. All this dampened its subspace and EM profiles even more, meaning that even when cruising at high impulse or warp speeds, it was barely a ripple on a sensor system. It had a maximum warp speed of just over 9.9, but it could cruise close to this near silently, which is the real feat. Its own sensors too were incredibly acute and mounted along that tall pylon, along with its specialised shield subsystem, but its exact weapon systems were undisclosed, although it was listed as being armed with both standard phaser arrays and photon torpedo launchers. The focus of this class is completely on the stealth aspect, and everything was built around that, from its shape to its warp systems to the numerous dampening methods and abilities it had to muffle its steps. When we see it in the shows, it was humorously surrounded in a storm, but I'm going to assume it was merely using this as cover, or perhaps it even has a generator on board that can create a local one to mask itself further. Probably just for laughs though, as, like the Osler vessel itself, seemed to be utilised in a bit of a practical joke, considering its menacing visage being at odds with its humanitarian role. Although originally it was created by the Andorian Imperial Guard to be a stealth ship, it arrived too late on the scene for that role, but it can still find a use in that field, showing just why Starfleet does not need cloaking devices to mask their vessels. Thanks for watching this breakdown on the lore of the Osler Class Starship, a striking vessel, which is ironic because it's apt at being completely unobserved. I've been Rick, thanks again, and goodbye.